Okay, well, we might get underway. Welcome everybody to today's TRI seminar series. My name's David Bunker. I'm the Executive Director of the Brisbane Diamantina Health Partners. So I'm really pleased to be able to here to support TRI seminar series. This is a great forum and it's a really great pleasure for me to be able to moderate this discussion today. Unfortunately, my co-moderator or co-chair moderator for today, Paul Clark, Professor Clark, is not available. He's had another meeting to get to. He said he may be able to get at the end, so we'll see how we go. But I wanted to thank him as well for his support in bringing this discussion about. So it's a bit of an odd one, maybe, why entrepreneurial mindset can help progress research. And so what I'm going to do is just do a few slides to talk about why this is important and the mindset that I guess I've got around this and how I see it's relevant. And then we've got a really terrific panel who we hope to be able to talk to the topic and also to hopefully answer some questions from the folks online today and also the people in the room. Excellent. Okay, so go. So the first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge and pay respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as First Australians. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders, laws, customs and creation spirits and extend that respect to anybody here today, online or in the room, who identifies. So, as I said, I work for BDHP, Brisbane Diamantina Health Partners. TRI is a member of this and the CEO of TRI, Scott Bell, is a member of our board. I did just want to say, what does that mean? So BDHP is accredited by NHMRC as an advanced health research translation centre. The role of organisations like BDHP around Australia is to bring health services, hospital and health services and universities and research institutes, educators and trainers together to really focus on translational research. And translational research is a really important concept at the moment. I've worked a lot in digital health and more recently in genomics and precision health. But I think one of the big challenges for our health and medical research system in Australia at the moment is how we really focus on increasing that impact of translational research and seeing that discovery, et cetera, go into practice. So I've got a slide on that, but just to position the centre that I look after and the groups around Australia, and that whilst we're bringing the services and partners together in Queensland, working with groups like TARC up in Townsville, we're also working with groups all around Australia who have a real focus on this idea of translational research and impact. So I like to start with a bit of an intro. And once again, this is important because it'll set the scene for the conversation about what we mean by entrepreneurialism and how we actually go about doing this translational research and creating impact from research into clinical practice and that nice cycle of a learning health system that we want to bring about. So I'd like to start with a bit of a definition of what I mean by translational research, and especially as we're at the Translational Research Institute today. So for me, it's about this idea of mobilizing research into practice and research into system and business transformation. So I see what we do in translational research as this really important pivot point between our research and our education and training and the way we deliver clinical care, and that there's a virtuous cycle that we can do so that research informs practice and that practice can inform the research we do. And so this little graph I've drawn here is the thing that I worry about, this idea that over time and knowledge, we have this idea of what we know. And most people in this room would fully understand and acknowledge the fact that our ability to generate new information and new knowledge is increasing rapidly because of digitization, because of this transformation of research to e-research and also more and more digital health and digital orientation. So that grows what we know and it grows expectations that people have of our system, in particular consumers and patients who have a sort of a digital experience in many other parts of their lives, but still sort of occasionally get bits of paper from the health system. And so I worry about this gap between what we know and how we practice. And I believe strongly that translational research is a really important vehicle to try and address this gap. BDHP strategic plan includes this idea, and I'm obviously not going to speak to all of this, of making the business of translation easier. And really, this is the conversation that we want to have today about the nature of entrepreneurialism. And I just wanted to position why something like this would be relevant and sort of in the ballpark of the things that BDHP is interested in. So this notion of how to make the business easier. And there are projects and activities that we've got going on. But in that context, when I talk about entrepreneurialism, I won't go with that one. What I'm really talking about is how do we go about actually doing really great translational research? So not so much the science and delving into the medical science, but the actual, I guess, transactional way of moving these projects forward and having them successfully, have sustainable funding or translation into business as usual. So this concept of entrepreneurialism is commonly created. Most people think of entrepreneurs. If you Google that, you see these sort of amazing startups and amazing business people. But I think in our area, what I'm really interested in is these qualities that these people have, this sort of skill set. And this is important because it's a skill set that you can acquire. I think there's an aptitude to entrepreneurialism, but I also think that there's a skill and something that you can develop. And I've asked some leaders from our health and medical research system today to talk about this. So for me, being entrepreneurial is about being business savvy and confident. It's about great planning and never giving up. But I think it's about how you spend your time and energy because we've all got so much to do and you have to be selective in that process. But the theme for today that I'm hoping we can bring out is about how you actually structure teams and work together to achieve that goal. Because this is not an individual pursuit, this kind of work, and it really takes a lot of different people with different skills and capabilities to come together. And I think that's what is underpinning success as we move forward. So how does it relate to translational research? Once again, I said it's this idea about a kind of a mindset, and it's coordinating and connecting and collaborating and bringing skilled workers together. So that's really what it's about. And so I won't go into any other detail at this stage other than say that what we'll do is I'll ask our panel members to come up onto the seats that have been provided, if Peter and Claire and Ranjani can do that. And if you guys can come up, and then what I'll do is I'll just say, we want to understand from these folks about whether they identify this idea of entrepreneurialism or a mindset in the work they do. Do they see these qualities in themselves and others? And some examples. And does this flow into approaches they have and when they build their teams? So that's the objective for us. And I'll start. I'm not going to do a big, long introduction, but I would like to introduce Professor Ranjani Thomas down on the end. Many of these people you'll be familiar with. Professor Claire Sullivan and Professor Peter Sawyer. So I'm very pleased. Thank you very much for coming today. So I guess I'll start by maybe just asking each of you to do a little bit of an introduction of yourself and maybe your team, and sort of let's maybe answer that first question about whether you or through your network identify with or know people that you see have that entrepreneurial mindset. So Claire, would it be okay if we start with you?
Yeah, hi everyone. So Claire Sullivan's my name. I'm an endocrinologist, but I spend most of my time heading up the Digital Health Research Network at University of Queensland. The network is relatively new, but University of Queensland has declared digital health a strategic priority, which means that we've invested funds in setting up a transdisciplinary group of people. So the group that I lead has people from IT, electrical engineering, science, maths, physics, business, economics, law, and anthropology. So I guess that really truly transdisciplinary as opposed to multidisciplinary team is relatively unique and new, but it gives us an enormous array of skill sets and an ability to engage across many sectors. I'm not sure that I've ever really thought of myself as an entrepreneur in the true sense, in that I clearly don't have a very flashy car or, millions of dollars, and I wouldn't want to. But I'm probably, I guess, interested in getting things done. And getting things done does require you to be savvy. It requires you to be organised. It requires you to understand budgets, governance, and ethics in a way that when I set out from medical school, I never thought I would ever have to do. So I do think that the way of the future, given how complex everything is becoming, is this transdisciplinary approach. And when you look at the funding bodies, they no longer want a hero single researcher. They want a researcher with a track record, with a strong team, with an ability to deliver, and the type of skills that actually result in tangible outcomes that change the way that we deliver care. So I guess if I had one message, it would be that I'm not sure that hero single people entrepreneurs are the way of the future. I think entrepreneurial teams perhaps are the way of the future, and we need to help people form those teams, to join those teams, to learn how to run those teams. And there's nowhere that attracts more entrepreneurs than digital health right now. So, there's a lot of hype and a lot of buzz, but it really is about who can deliver, who has the skills, and at the end of the day, who's actually got the right intent at heart. So it's pretty obvious. I think if I was going out to sell apps, I think that'd be evident. But actually, that's not what our team's about. It's actually about making a difference. And so actually authentically having values that align with people that support you is, I think, really important. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Claire. That's wonderful. Ranjani, perhaps I could ask you a similar question. Do you identify with this idea of having an entrepreneurial mindset about exploring the potentialities of what you can achieve?
Yeah, so I'm a rheumatologist, and I trained did my MD doctorate in immunology and in cellular immunology, and I was really trying to understand how rheumatoid arthritis came about. But over my career, I've really developed, used my entrepreneurial mindset, which is really part of me. It comes from my family background, which I'll go into in a minute, to change the way I've worked across developing an immune tolerance strategies, understanding immune tolerance, trialing these, finding out what does and doesn't work, talked with partners and other entrepreneurs, and networked with pharmaceutical companies and investment, to be able to undertake really first in human clinical trials, push the frontier of what we're able to do in medicine and in rheumatology, and really to articulate a vision of how it could be better for patients with autoimmune disease, so that we can get to a point where we can actually intercept or prevent people at risk of getting disease from getting a disease. So I think we've gone from understanding a disease all the way through to getting a cure or a prevention for that disease. And that's really, I think for me, it's really about having a vision, and then having an entrepreneurial mindset is for me about people that have an absolute drive and passion and commitment to get that vision achieved. And then they kind of inspire other people to come with them, and then they create the roles for people to work together towards that vision, and they adapt to how to get the final outcome, not according to what their first iteration of the vision was, but according to the results they get and to the change in the circumstances, because everything else is changing around you all the time. So what you start out thinking is not always what you end up thinking. And you need to be networking and adapting according to the intel that you have from your environment. So the people that I know are entrepreneurial are my dad, my sister, my uncles and my cousins. And it's great to have like-minded people in the family, but it sure can be terrifying to be at family gatherings, because too many people like this in one room are really quite terrifying. And people that I recruit to my group have to be able to tolerate this kind of way of working. And they can be a little bit like me, but we can't all be the same. We have to be basically able to fit together, and our abilities have to work together to achieve a vision, rather than all be entrepreneurial in the exact same way. So I'll just stop there.
Thanks, Ranjani. That's awesome. So Peter, over to you. Same question, a bit of an intro of yourself. And I know when we were emailing and talking about this, I don't think you immediately saw entrepreneurialism in yourself. And I wonder if that's changed and when you've been reflecting on this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me. My name is Peter Sawyer. As my two colleagues, I'm also in the medical discipline, dermatology. So I think we are all now surgeons, which is already quite interesting, the group of people sitting here. I came to Australia in 2007 I had a relatively good tenure position in a relatively big dermatology department, and probably what drives me is obviously curiosity, learning to know new things, new cultures, and so on. And one of the things when I think of my career is what I enjoyed most traveling around the world. You know, I have been in Khartoum, I have been in Tehran, I have been in China, and I have been, of course, in the common places in the States and so on. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. And actually what you were saying, Ranjani, resonates with me. In my family, there are actually only entrepreneurs. And I always see myself as a black sheep. I can't read a budget sheet, you know, I mean, I can read it, but I don't understand it. So I don't see myself as an entrepreneur in the classical spirit, right? Having said this, I see myself certainly as a team player. And this comes from my very young days when I played in a team where handball, you know, and I was definitely not the best player because my hands are too small for this. But I was always quite a good team player. And this is basically what drives me. And that was mentioned, I mean, there's this sentence which you all know, the sum is greater than the individual parts. But this, guys, is a huge challenge. Because who wants to be a part of something great? You know what I mean? In some way, we want to be the leader. We want to be recognized in research, you know. And what makes me, for example, so angry is that only first authorship or last authorship counts, right? But in relevant papers, there are quite a few people involved. And Fiona, looking at you, you have solved this quite nicely. And what we can learn from you is tenacity, right? Tenacity and how you keep a team together that several people are leading, senior leaders, junior leaders. So this is something which, in my point of view, is a major entrepreneurial mindset, you know, that you are really able to form a team. And I have to say that I am extremely blessed to have a great team of professional support, of research support. So this is actually something which I really enjoy here. And I also realized that I made quite a bit of transformation back in Europe. I was collaborating to 95% just with dermatologists. You name it, in which country, right? From Slovenia to Italy to Germany to France and so on. Now I'm actually much less collaborating with dermatologists, but I'm collaborating with researchers in all fields, from behavioral science to pathology, from health economic to artificial intelligence. And I think this is one of the great assets in Australia, that we have this multimodal aspect. I have one problem with this entrepreneurial mindset, and you showed it in one of your slides. You were mentioning one has to be selective with the time and with the commitment. And as a researcher, we need to have a lot of time to go into the nitty-gritty, to zoom in a very, very, very small problem, right? And to use a lot of time to solve this and to think about this. As an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial mind, you have to see the big picture, you have to think on the vision, you have to develop the mission. So in this, from my point of view, this is something which is probably not so easy to achieve, between having the scrutiny to go into the detail on one hand and seeing the big picture on the other. And I always make jokes now, getting older, I don't understand the details anymore. Sometimes I hope at least that I see the big picture. So thanks.
Thank you, Peter. That's an excellent segue, because the next sort of structured part of this, I did want to explore that idea of how you manage time, because I think that one of the aspects beyond this notion of this mindset and building teams is this idea of being selective. And then I want to talk a little bit about innovation, and then we'll do some Q&A. So in terms of where Peter's sort of starting to talk about that being selective about time, Claire, maybe, you know, you're an extremely busy person like everybody, and particularly in this time, and across a lot of things, and at that front edge of things where you spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand where the world is going and why your work is relevant and how it fits in. But how do you approach that personally, and then within your team? How do you be selective about where you invest your time?
That's such a good question. And I think it's not just time, it's energy, as Peter alluded to. And so one of the hallmarks, I hope, of our work in digital health is just remaining calm. So one thing that will really destabilise the team is emotional contagion. So if the team sees me angry, or they see me upset, or they see me frustrated, that contagion will flow through the entire team. And one of my bosses, John Prince, said to me, Claire, if you cough, the team thinks you have pneumonia. And I've always taken that to heart. So no matter what is happening out there, I try to keep that calmness and that understanding that whatever is happening, it's probably not worth wasting our energy and time on. We'll get around it. We'll find a way around it. You rarely see successful entrepreneurs in this business who shout, who make a fuss, who abuse people, who are aggressive. That type of persona might be successful, I guess, in private industry. I wouldn't have any clue. But when you're trying to do something new in the healthcare system, that equanimity, the acceptance that there will be obstacles, but a quiet confidence that you can navigate them is priceless, because the team will see that. They stay true to the vision and they will help you. So I don't waste time on complaining. Don't waste time writing nasty emails. Scott Bell can attest to this. Just stay calm, find out what the problem is, keep your sense of humour, and allocate your energy in the right place with the right people to keep going towards your vision. But don't burn it on things that are a complete waste of time. And that positive, calm mindset is essential to create change at scale.
Awesome, that's a terrific answer, thank you. So I've worked in health for the last sort of 15 years, and that's been sort of in and around government. But prior to that, I spent 20 years in management and technology consultancy, and especially during the .com. And there were lots of people who would bang the desk and shout at me. And, you know, that's sort of how business got done. But I'd like to think the world's changing, and I can say it's not necessarily something that I see in the health and medical research space. So Ranjani, you know, once again, same question, but in your context about how do you be selective, and selective on behalf of the people that you're working with. That's a really important thing as well. So maybe your ideas on that selection of investment of time.
So I just wanted to pick up something Peter said, which is about vision and actually the details, because it's absolutely right. There has to be someone with the vision to articulate and to understand what are the details we need to solve. But if you're all vision and no delivery, no outcomes, then there'll be nothing. So I know from having worked with a lot of pharmaceutical and other industry partners that, you know, they'll buy your vision, but for only so long. And if you can't deliver, then there's nothing to pay for. So your key experiments and your key trials need to actually be sufficiently positive in their outcome for the next step to be done. And in getting those things to work, you know, there's a lot of steps on the way to get a big trial, first in man trial done. And that's individual daily problem solving. And that in itself is innovation. Innovation is not really about the big vision and sort of thinking up the great idea. It's actually solving the problems to get the thing done. And that's where your team is so critical, because if you can rely on your team to do those things, you can remain calm in selling the vision. If your team is not up to it, then obviously you're going to panic, and that's going to come through. But that's, you know, we're constantly having to readjust because the environment's changing and the needs are changing for what you need from for your team to deliver, and your partners are changing. So I think, you know, we have the vision, but we fill in the detail. And meanwhile, we think about what the risks are, because obviously there's always going to be risks to things failing, and you've got to have the mitigation strategies that you're working on in the background, just in case it doesn't work out as you expected. And this is often the case. In terms of time management, yeah, I'm sure, like Peter and Claire, I'm asked to do many, many things by many, many people who sort of hope that I can do this, that, and the other. And sometimes they put a lot of pressure. For example, before Paul came, a lot of people put pressure on me to apply to be the director of DI. And I resisted that because I had other things that I really, really needed to do. And I think sometimes taking on the wrong role for you is really good because you realize what you love and what you hate. And it's in realizing what you hate and where it's taking away from what you love, where you know you're not going to do a good job and you have to keep saying no to those things because you know it's not going to work out well in the end for them or you. And this really helps you to focus. And I think the other thing is that you need to understand what it is you can do best and what it is that each member of your team can do best, and don't cross the lines. Because if I go and look through the microscope in my lab when I'm paid the salary I'm paid and not writing the grants or making sure that everything else is sorted for the other people to achieve what they need to achieve, I'm just wasting time and money. So I need to really be clear on what my role should be and what each member of my team should do. And that way we'll all be happy and we'll all achieve a good outcome.
Thanks, Ranjani. That's a really good point. That, you know, that idea of being selective in your time is also about getting the most out of the people as well, so that they're all, you know, invested as well. So innovation was actually my academic field. That was my field of study, was in management science. I'm not sure that's a real science, but in management science. So for me, innovation is underpinned by entrepreneurialism. And in many respects, entrepreneurialism is synonymous with leadership, and that leadership can come from within the team. So I wanted to ask you a question about innovation, because I think what I got taught about innovation is that innovation is both sought, as in we want to do something innovative, but it's also found. And it's about going, that's an innovation, or that's innovative, and identifying those ideas. So I wonder about your opinion about how can we use leadership and entrepreneurial kind of mindset as part of the fuel for the furnace that drives our innovation agenda. I don't know, Peter, Claire, Ranjani, either one. I'm going to ask all of you anyway.
So I struggle to see how you could innovate without a mindset that wants to try new things. So innovation, I guess the definition of innovation is a better way to do things. I guess these days I'm less interested in innovation than I am in improvement, which is using innovation to deliver better outcomes. So you could argue, actually, it's easy for me to innovate and invent a new way to do something with data, but the improvement is then when we put that into the clinic and we see better outcomes. So a true entrepreneur perhaps will paint that vision of using the data in a new way, not just as an innovation, but as an improvement. And we will create new ways of monitoring outcomes in the clinic that will make things better. So by actually being able to paint the picture of the outcome as the entrepreneur, I guess, people will understand what they need to do for the innovation and why, and translate that into an outcome which is meaningful. So for many of us, simply inventing a new way of doing things is not particularly interesting. It might result in a publication, which is important. It's how we all stay alive. But the improvement, what does that actually mean for our consumers, for our society? That's where people start to become invested in what they're doing. And so to drive that continuous innovation and improvement, the vision that somebody with that mindset can paint is critical. If my vision simply was a better way of data extraction, I don't know that we would be getting the type of support that we are. If our vision is how to drive a data-driven healthcare system, people get it. So the job of the entrepreneurial mindset person is to translate the innovations that we have into improvements which are tangible, relatable, and appealing to the team and those who wish to invest in your work.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Peter, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, obviously we're living in an area where innovation is everywhere, right? In all fields of life, you know. This is one thing, and I think this is pretty unique in the last 20 years, obviously, to internet and all these sort of things. And knowledge, you find it everywhere. And I think in regards to, I just can tell you innovation is sometimes always something subjective. For example, what we are doing, and this sounds maybe now a little bit silly, we are looking very careful what is happening in radiology, where there is 30 years of experience with imaging, with standardization, with workflows and so on. Dermatology imaging is basically very, very at the beginning, because dermatologists usually think we look at something and we know what it is, and believe me, and I treat you, right? But what we are, for example, looking what is happening in radiology and want to basically learn from radiology and deliver then into dermatology, which in some way you can say this is just a copycat issue, right? On the other hand, in our specific field, it is obviously innovation, because we are doing something which is completely new and changes the paradigm, how dermatology diagnosis is done and how we want to bring in telehealth and all these sort of things, right? So innovation is always a little bit of subjective, but what I enjoy is reading also in other fields of life sciences, what is going on, and just to try to understand then what we can extract and put into our own discipline. Just a word in regards to time selection. I mean, obviously a big issue is work-life balance, right? For all of us who are working in research, who are working in the clinical world. And the reality is this: if you are ambitious, and usually people who are researchers and have an entrepreneurial mindset, they're usually also ambitious. And I think this is something positive, because you're not ambitious, you will probably drink a few beer or walk around and be happy with your job. So I, for example, have a terrible work-life balance, I can tell you. Yeah, you just need to ask my wife, and I obviously failed my whole life in this, because I never looked at the hours I'm working. And the reality, it's a terrible imbalance, right? And I just mentioned this, that you guys hopefully do better, right? Because this is something which is so important. And what I tried, obviously, with my team from the very beginning, even back in Austria, I allowed people to work half-time, 2 days a week with me, 3 days a week. And I know my old bosses, and even here, no, either you work full-time or you are off. You know what I mean? And I have very, very strong feeling, and this is obviously for women, but actually there are also quite a few men around who just like to work 2 or 3 days in a specific field. And I think here we have to be very open and take into consideration this kind of work-life balance issue. And my feeling is this: when people love what they do, yeah, they do in 2 days more than someone else who works 5 days if this person doesn't love what they are doing. So it's all about having enthusiasm for the work you do. And this, from my point of view, is the most relevant secret for whatever we are doing, independent if this is research, entrepreneurial, or whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've done a bit of commercialization. So I wanted to bring you back to the concept you started, which is the business, because innovation really includes the money. You know, show me the money. Otherwise, none of us would be able to do any of this. So you've really got to have that inventive alignment of the stars, where there's a novel finding, something that can be applied, and something that will actually lead to a better outcome for a patient. And when those come together, that's a new invention that's actually worth monetizing and can be invested in. And once you realize what that combination of things is, and you see it in your lab, someone produces something that you realize, right, if we develop this, it really could make a difference to people, then it's worth putting your heart and soul into it. Because if it really can make that much of a difference, your innovation, it's worth protecting. It's worth patenting if that's the kind of space that it's in, or it's worth keeping confidential if that's the kind of space it's in, because there are different ways of protecting. And then once it's yours and you've got money and investment from someone else who wants to do it with you, That's the only way that it can really ever get to people, because without money, we can't do any of this. It's great to have papers and it's great to be doing research and to be feeling we're making a difference to someone in the future. But if we actually don't do that with a consistent and conscientious approach, we actually won't achieve it. So that's the hard part, I think, in Australia. It's the mindset that we really need to cultivate. We need to be much more aware of money and the business acumen that you need in order to do this. And so we should be running our labs really like small businesses, which is what they are. We deal with a lot of money in our grants, and we can deal with a lot more with commercial investment, and that will get us to where we need to go.
Thanks, Ranjani. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So I want to get to question answer, but I've got to ask one more very quick question. And this is maybe a little bit controversial, and it actually stems off a lot of the comments you've made. And that is actually about risk, and it's about failure. So good innovation theory talks about organisations and teams that can fail fast. And where I've led innovative groups and programs and businesses and high performance teams, I've always tried to create a culture that supported that notion of fail fast. But Ranjani, there's a lot at stake. And the people who are funding and investing have high expectations of the outcome. How do you approach the notion of being able to fail?
Fail fast, fail early is the mantra. And that really can be tough, but I think you have to accept, and Fiona should be nodding, that this can occur, and your team needs to know that it can occur, that it's a high stakes game. So you try to fail fast in the lab as much as possible so that you can put your best foot forward into the next step. Try to innovate in the small ways in order to make the big thing more likely to succeed. You definitely don't want to be doing badly prepared work so that in the big experiment it fails. So that's what I was talking about before, about mitigating risk. Undertaking some additional work in the background so that you can understand what's going to happen before you finally hand it over to your pharmaceutical partner and then have them fail. So you want to make sure that it works in your hands, and then you give them the technique so that it will work in their hands. So I think it's about being prepared to take a risk, trying to take them early and small so that in the big experiment it succeeds if possible.
Thanks. And Claire, I wonder if you can help us with this one just quickly to think about, from a clinician perspective. If you're doing kind of pure and applied science, the nature of that is it's exploratory and there's risk and reward, and it's a different ratio. When you get right up to clinic, it's a very different concept of the risk-reward ratio when you're dealing with people's lives and complex systems and teams that come together in hospitals and our health system. So somewhere along that translational spectrum is this idea. How do you balance this idea of where that risk reward and that ability to fail can actually be, for me, something that gives the health system a trusted partner through translational research?
Yep. So I don't think we should be afraid of failure. So I'm an endocrinologist and I prescribe a lot of drugs. I have to choose a drug. I have to choose a dosage. Most of the time, first time I do that with somebody, I get it wrong. And that's not because I'm a bad endocrinologist. It's because of the complexity and the number of decisions that we have to make in clinical care. What I found is that in digital health, that attitude is not the same, and failure is not at all tolerated. And the idea that you might make a mistake is not part of the lexicon. So part of what I've been doing in my work is actually explaining and leading some of that cultural change, that it is okay to make mistakes, that we take an iterative approach. It's a partnership. We're not going to get it right the first time, but we're going to work together to get you on the right drug at the right dose so that you have a better outcome. That's a very different approach to a binary, is it correct or not approach. It's a partnership. It's a bootstrapping approach. It's an iterative approach. And it takes a partnership between either yourself and the consumer, the clinic, to trust each other and to work together to get the right dose, or yourself and the funding body to have an iterative approach to whatever solution it is that you're trying to build. We take a risk every time we prescribe insulin that a person might have a hypoglycemic event, which can be serious. And yet in digital health, we're not allowed to suggest there might be a risk that an application may fail. Now I know which one is actually more material in its risk. So how do we actually create that iterative bootstrapping approach in research and in digital health particularly? to enable that trusted partnership, which allows true organic innovation and improvement to flourish over time. And so I think we're getting there in Queensland. This idea of partnership and iterative improvement is starting to happen. And I'm actually very confident that that cultural change around continuously improving what it is that we're doing rather than having a binary pass-fail is starting to become the norm. So I'm actually really excited about the cultural change that we're seeing and the idea of continuous improvement rather than pass-fail.
Can I just put something in there? I think the other thing that's helpful in high stakes failure experiments, like first in human clinical trials with a product you've developed, which I have to say is terrifying. The prospect is terrifying. So the whole lab is terrifying. Is have an experienced mentor, because experienced mentors who've been there before will have the wisdom and the experience on their side to say, look, it's not that bad. You can do this. And Mark Feldman in the UK was a great mentor to me, sort of said, well, look, the only way to find out if this is going to work is to put it into patients. You can't just keep doing this in animals. You'll never understand what happens in humans unless you do it. And so I just bit the bullet and did it. And it was the best thing I ever did.
Thank you, Imogen. Not a bad segue. I really like conversations I get in with Peter, and we're hearing him speak, and he's, I think, at that point in his career where there's a lot of that wisdom and reflection. And so, Peter, just a very quick one around risk. Do you have a different approach to risk now than you had earlier in your career?
I mean, there are two different things. Risk in the clinical setting is a completely different thing, and I think we have to be very careful with taking risk, and this is completely different. In regard to entrepreneurial things, as boys, we always had this kind of saying, no risk, no fun, right? And I really think that this is also true for entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm pretty sure that the top entrepreneurs in the world, they have also a lot of fun, you know what I mean? And they, of course, they are failing several times, but then they're standing up and becoming superstars. So this is something which I like, this kind of stupid saying, no risk, no fun. But in the clinical world, in God's sake, right, we really have, this is a completely different approach. And I wouldn't like to take this. I mean, actually, I'm even afraid to say it, right?
Well, dermatology is not very risk laden, I guess.
No, look, I mean, no, guys, this is a big misunderstanding for people.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you one thing. Missing a melanoma is a stress for the patient, is a stress for the doctor. And I know many young colleagues who can't sleep for weeks if they miss something what is called an cytomelanoma, which was overdiagnosed by a pathologist because the pathology threshold has changed over the years. And this is a huge risk, you know, this is, so there is, and then of course, we have also significant severe dermatologic conditions like bullous diseases, you know what I mean, all over the body. And guys, believe me or not, we had a month here, in 1 month, we had 2 patients who died on our ward. One has obviously a Castleman disease with a paraneoplastic pemphigus, and the other has a bullous pemphigus with a gastric cancer. Of course, they didn't die of the dermatologic condition, but they died under dermatologic watch. So, and in all fairness, I have seen back in the old days, people dying on erythrodermic pustular psoriasis. But of course, in most cases, I completely agree with you. And this is something which I'm used to live with, right? I mean, it's a little bit differentiated. Of course, no one will die on an eczema or the fungus on the toe or whatever.
All right, thank you very much. So look, we've got some time now for questions. We've got over 40 people online and a bunch of people in the room. So roving mic time. I think if you're online and you put questions in the Q&A box, I can see them here and I'll do my best to moderate, but we might start with a question from the audience.
Hi, so I'd just like to make a comment and then ask a question. Our phase 1b trials were successful and we're now going to phase 2. So I'm a little distracted as to what failure I'm supposed to be admitting to. But my question is this: when you have sessions like this and you formalize a mindset and you formalize the skills that are required, I find the biggest problem in Australia for entrepreneurship is a need for everybody to conform, to follow the lines, to fit the administration, to fit other people's ideas of what they should be. And so I actually wonder if trying to define entrepreneurial behavior kills it.
If I just can make a very short comment, because you're obviously speaking a little bit of the red tape in Australia, right? Yeah, and I can just tell you, if you lived and worked like I did for 23 years in the Austrian system, but I did also have worked in sabbaticals in Slovenia and in Italy, you have much less red tape here. And in many things compared to what is happening in Europe, it's a wild west here, right? I mean, I really can say this because I lived it, yeah? So it is, I understand, of course, there is still enough red tape, and it's obviously getting worse over time. This is one aspect. The other thing is, guys, you shouldn't forget 25 million people are living here, yeah? Still, we have our own TGA, right? Which is obviously our wisdom group. And then we have 500 million in Europe, 350 million, you know what I mean? 1.5 billion in China. We are a small place, but still I think we have a beautiful infrastructure. I can really tell you guys, we shouldn't underestimate how beautiful our infrastructure is in many, many aspects. Having said this, there are always places in the world where it's better. If you go to Johns Hopkins or Stanford, or I don't know, to the Charité in Berlin, or it might be better, but you have to go there.
People all have to follow the same track or be the same way or have the same qualities. I think if you talk to multiple entrepreneurs, as I have while I've been out begging for money, they're all extremely different and they all approach things in very, very different ways. So can you really say this is what you have to be an entrepreneur? Or quite often aren't the biggest success stories the most unexpected people?
Maybe partly what you're referring to is the academic space, where there is a lot of conformity because of the way that we're judged in terms of getting grant money. And my only comment is that if it's too hard, just leave. Just go and form a spin-off, join a company, do something different, because you don't have to stay in academia to pursue your dream. It's only one of the spaces in which you could be innovative. So I've thought about it many times, because it really is a very hard road in Australia.
Everywhere. Academia is difficult everywhere in the world. But still, I mean, what you are saying, Ranjani, this is this kind of saying, love it, leave it, or change it, right?
Yeah.
Certain things you will not be able to change the way academia is seen in Australia. I don't think so. Then you are not on the correct place. You should be basically compete with Anne and Kelso and others in certain positions, then you might change it, you know? And then at the end of the day, yeah, love it or leave it. And I can just tell you, I really love it. And I know very well with my energy, if I would work in private practice as a dermatologist, I would earn 4 or 5 times what I'm earning here, right? But I don't regret it. I'm very happy. I enjoy it. So for me, it's fine. And I make this very, very personal choice. Yeah.
To make one point, I think Fiona's right. I think there should be a diversity of people and approaches. So I'm terrible at networking. I always leave immediately. I never talk to anybody afterwards, although I speak confidently to a group. Trying to pitch myself to someone would make me die inside. So I do think, but despite that, it's gone okay. So I do think we need a diversity of people and approaches, and that's true of any part of healthcare. So I do agree that there's a diversity of approach and way that we should be embracing and promoting diversity in different types of people and different ways of doing things. So actually, I agree, and I don't fit the traditional mold at all. I never go to a networking event. So I think you're right. I think we should embrace diversity in all its forms.
Thank you. I think there's a few questions here in the room, but I just want to say there was a question online, which was, I think we've answered, which is about when you recruit to your team, do you actively recruit to fill the gaps in personality types and skill sets to create a diverse team? Or do you take that most enthusiastic high performer who applies? So I feel that's kind of been answered. There's another good one, which is
A bit of both is the answer.
a bit of both. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so the other question is there a healthy, ideal proportion of research activity that should be entrepreneurial? How do you create that space for that?
Yeah, lots of money. Play money.
Okay.
Yeah, which Peter said, what is it? Risk is to play.
Yeah.
Risk is to play.
No, I was saying no risk, no fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So play money. But if you don't, if money is very, very tight, you have to do what you have to do, and you don't have as much leeway to play.
Yeah. Think, play, do.
Mm.
Another question up here in the audience. I think the gentleman at the back and then down to the front. Yeah.
Thanks. Firstly, thank you for your time. It's three very distinct mindsets, which have given us a good view. I've got two burning questions, which are kind of interrelated. So one of them is, for those of us who aren't driven by business, by entrepreneurialism, by money, who are pure communists at heart, essentially, does discovery-based research, non-hypothetical, completely basic, unashamedly discovery-based research play any role in research translational? And the second thing is, I do a lot of reading and some work around ethics and integrity, not the UQ style of ethics and integrity, which is around about compliance, but more the morality of research. And time again, companies like Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, some of the small scale, large companies, if you will, do research on their own work and go overwhelmingly, if you say to researchers, here's a pot of money, this is the drug, they will commit fraud. So the idea that greed is committing fraud, because all researchers are interested in publishing the paper. And as long as you get that result. So how do you then manage not having that big aspect of not being able to produce reproducible research, which is a massive crisis right now in an entrepreneurial mindset? So the first one is around about discovery-based research, where we don't want to have irreproducible research. And the second is this conformity that Fiona was mentioning, that we have to do translational research to be successful. So it's easier for a lot of researchers in Australia to commit fraud, which is what's happening.
Do you want me to
I
answer?
know it's quite controversial, but it's true.
No, I was just trying to grasp all of the question. I think that there's fraud no matter which mindset you have. People are people, and there are incentives. I think a lot of it, we need to think about incentives that drive behavior. And if the incentive to drive publication is to get the next grant or the next career progression, then whether or not you're being funded by Amgen or whether you're being funded by the NHMRC, your incentive is to get that publication by hook or by crook. So then it comes down to your personal and your group's integrity. So you have to have integrity whether or not you're working at either extreme. And that is absolutely critical to the whole research foundation on which we sit. And I don't think it's necessarily, going to be pulled either way, depending on where you're funded. But there are disincentives in either side. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure what the rest of it was about.
I guess you can have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you will, but not be driven by money. So much of our stuff is actually open source, digital health. So we share our code. We're not actually commercializing or making money out of it. So I don't know where that fits in your thinking, but the outcome for us is actually seeing the translational outputs, no financial recompense to us at all. But it seems to be a way that is attractive then to funders, that these people will produce things that go open source, GitHub, other people can use them. So not all of it is wet lab, pharma. Some of the stuff that we're doing is, particularly in digital health, we often make open source. We don't commercialize so that it is available for others to use and improve upon.
First question was, where does discovery-based research, what role does that play in translational research? Don't have that translational mindset. Just want to ask why does X do that?
Oh, look, I think if that interests you, go for it. Absolutely. That's good, isn't it? I don't see a problem with that. Yeah.
I think, look, you can have an entrepreneurial mindset and do discovery-based research. It's all about the vision to discover something and then going after it in the same way that we've all been talking about. But what is really helpful is to know how your piece fits with the next piece. Even if you don't do it, there's always a fit, because that, if you can link with the next piece, that means that your discovery will go into the translational pipeline. It's not that it's not important, but you've got to understand how you fit.
Yeah. That's the thing, it's that continuum. I think that's a critical part of translational research. By definition, is the translation of research up that pipeline. Translational research is also this thing that's kind of identified at that nexus point. But I think Ranjani's right. Even if you're working in one element, you have to be mindful of everything behind you and everything that's in front of you in terms of getting health outcomes and system improvement. So we had a question from Graham. Oh, and Scott, so apologies.
Thanks, David. Claire and Peter, you started by talking about the importance of collaboration in everything we do. And Peter, you highlighted the importance of interdisciplinary components of that research, particularly since you've been here. So my question is, what do you need to do to set the collaborations up for success? And what do you need to do to maintain them as successful? I'm just interested in your views on how you've done that.
Yeah, look, I mean, thank you for this question. I can just tell a little bit how we do it with ASMIT, which is basically a consortium between 3 universities, University of Sydney and Monash and UQ. And we very openly discuss who goes for which grants. And actually, we are living this. 2 of our biggest grants have been got by a Monash researcher, by Tori Ma. And we have decided I go for the frontier grants. I was unsuccessful. She gets for the image grant. She was successful. And I was going for the higher risk and I lost. She was going for the lower risk and she won. But this sort of things keep teams together. And she has now got another grant. And the same thing is what we do within the teams and also within the publications. If you have a team, you can't always lead it. It's really about leadership teams, And one of the things which I really think needs to be changed is in regards to assessment of younger colleagues. It's not just about the first author papers, and it's about that you are a good team player. I mean, I know people who have 10 papers first author. This makes me nervous, right? This really makes me nervous. If people have 3, 4 first author paper and then 1 or 2 second author paper and some middle author paper, then I have the impression this is a person who is a team player, right? And I think you have to live this, and we try to do this. Does it help that I'm getting older and already thinking of my succession planning? Probably it does, right? If I would be 10 years younger, I would be probably a little bit more ambitious and try to, you know what I mean, yeah? So it certainly there are a few aspects who plays a role, but I think the future is research teams, right? But the art is how each team is basically, you know what I mean? How you say it, equal inter pares, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that you are all of Augenhöhe, of eye level, and this is not so easy. Yeah. Because I also realize I am sometimes, if we have meetings, I like to speak too much. I speak louder than the others. You know what I mean? So it's to take yourself back is a big point, which I think is necessary to have successful teams.
Similarly to Peter, I guess, Scott, I had to shift from multidisciplinary team to transdisciplinary team. And I didn't really understand the difference until I lived it. And so for those of you who might not have had to go through this yet, a multidisciplinary team is one which you or somebody leads, and it's full of people with different skill sets. A transdisciplinary team actually leaves people where they are. So an example is in digital health. I haven't employed coders. I haven't employed people who do AI. They still sit in the School of Maths and Physics or the School of ITEE. So they sit within their discipline, they sit within their school, and they are appropriately recognised as leaders in that area. But we all work together. Now that's very different to me employing a coder to sit under me in medicine. And likewise, ITEE now don't go and find an entrepreneurial doctor necessarily to engage with. They will actually come back to medicine and get the right engagement through the clinical school. So it really is tidying up the engagement, understanding that you want the best of the field to work with you, not perhaps somebody who's not quite the best to work under you. And so for me, that was a revelation that I want to work with the best. I don't want someone who's not quite the best to work under me. And so that transdisciplinary mindset is being critical for me, in that I want to work with the best from all of those areas. I don't want them to work for me. As Peter says, I want them to work eye to eye, so that we really have that group leadership dynamic. They'll tell me when I'm wrong, I'll tell them when they're wrong, but that kind of lovely group of equals to push forward a vision and an agenda.
That's terrific. Look, we are at time. However, I would feel terrible if we didn't get to Graham's question. So maybe very quickly.
Thanks, David. I mean, it's interesting, and it's been a great discussion, and often we think of entrepreneurs as individuals, and all three of you have referred to entrepreneurial teams, and I think that's been an important component. At the end of the day, the buck stops you as the leader of the team. How do you find the balance between managing a team and micromanaging the team?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I micromanage only in this very small scene where is my expertise, you know, which is probably 10 or 15% of the research we are doing. In all the other 85%, I'm definitely not micromanaging. But in the field where I have the expertise, which is dermoscopy, dermoscopic pathologic correlation, I'm pretty picky, and I'm prone to micromanage, which is not good, but this is how I am.
I don't micromanage anywhere. So I've deliberately employed people that I trust who have considerable expertise, and I just don't micromanage them. If they need micromanaging, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, I don't believe in it. I think people get suffocated by micromanagement.
Terrific. Okay, well, look, we'll bring it to a conclusion. Thank you, everybody online, for your questions. I think we got through most of them and the comments online, and thank you to the audience. Most of all, I'd really like to thank Peter and Claire and Ranjeni today, and also TRI for hosting this event. So if you join me in thanking the panel, and then we'll conclude. Thank you very much.